I have two bags of books here, and I want to show you what I got because I got some literally incredible things. First item I got was Ursula K. Le Guin's The Tales from Earthsea. This is actually on my TBR for this year, and so when I saw it for less than $8, I absolutely had to pick this one up. This is one of her classic sci-fi novels, and I've actually been seeing a lot of people that I follow on Book Talk reading this, so this kind of felt like kismet to buy. The next I got was this super, super old Reinhardt edition of William Wordsworth's The Prelude, which is a collection of poems and sonnets. Let's see, when was this published? This was published in 1948, so this is really fun. I love Wordsworth's poetry. I think it's just something I like to tuck into when I want something. The next I got were two NYRB books. The first one is called Red Lights by Simenon, and then the second one is Back by Henry Green. Back is a story of a World War II prisoner of war serviceman. He returns and really struggles to ingratiate himself, of course, with the life that he's returned to. The woman that he loves is gone. She passed away shortly after he left for World War II, and it's sort of a Shakespearean comedy of mistaken identities, a voyage into the world of madness, and a celebration of the improbable healing powers of love. And then Red Lights. It's Labor Day weekend in America. People are hitting the highways in droves. The radio crackles with warnings of traffic jams. Steve Hogan and his wife Nancy have a long drive from New York City to Maine. And then soon as they're in this car, issues in their relationship sort of begin to bubble over and they begin to have conversations. And then by the time they arrive, Nancy is very angry and she leaves the car, and Steve ends up finding this guy on their trip who has just escaped from the prison called Sing Sing. And so the novel kind of takes a very treacherous turn, so that kind of just sounded interesting. And I really like, typically NYRB can't do me wrong. The next is an old paperback copy of John Knowles's A Separate Piece. I read this book in high school and it was one of my favorites that I read in my entire 4 years of high school. This is a book about two friends. I don't really know if you can call them friends, but they are two boys that are put together at this pre World War II or like early World War II boarding school. The novel really explores the troubled world of adolescence and how boys, specifically in this novel, but it can be applicable to all humanity, the years of your adolescence are marred with jealousies and a fractured sense of identity, and there's some devastating things that happen in this book because of that. And this is one of those I read and it just sticks with you. If you have not read A Separate Piece and you really enjoy character driven, looks at the past and adolescence, this is going to be a book you will enjoy. I cannot believe I found this on the shelf. It is Steinbeck's The Pearl with the Red Pony from Penguin Classics. I have wanted this book forever, and it was only $6. So we definitely picked that one up. I have become a recent fan of John Steinbeck. Of course, I had to read him in high school and college, but I don't know, the pieces that my teachers chose, I just didn't identify with them. My cat wants to get in on the action. By having read East of Eden lately, I've really kind of taken a newer appreciation of his work, and I know that The Pearl is another really like popular, beloved sort of novella of his. So $6. I mean, can't go wrong. And then last but certainly not least, this is a first edition Signet Classics of Virginia Woolf's Orlando. This book spans 3.5 centuries of boisterous, exuberant adventure in England, in Constantinople, with aristocrats first as a man and then in a woman. Orlando's story is a farce, a humorous history, a romance filled with the delightful experiences of one of the most fascinating characters ever to rule the realm of fiction. Immediately, yes. This is another one that's been on my TBR for a while, really since I started reading Lit Fic back in early 2025. So this one cost me a little bit more, but again, considering that it's a first edition of the Signet Classics, I really could not pass this one up.
Oh my gosh.
I wanted to do a update on my progress with the Count of Monte Cristo. Since I posted my 24-hour reading marathon where I really hauled ass through 10 chapters of this book, I had to take like a week break. It was just so much that happened. Hi. She's become the best reading companion. I had to take a break. It was so much that happened in that like 50 chapters 50 to 60. Like I was taking furious notes. I just really honestly struggled to keep things straight because characters were getting introduced to the plot that seemed familiar in how they were speaking and acting around the count, but they were assuming a different name or identity. The Count's plan is clearly coming to fruition, but it's not yet clear to us, the reader, how that's going to look. And yet, I stopped kind of right at the threshold of where I knew that narrative drama was going to unfold, or at least begin to unfold. And I'm really glad that I did because now I can read the next 10 chapters with a much more clear head. So today I sat and read 4 chapters. I read 61 through 65. And in that segment, we essentially begin to see how the Count is honestly psychologically and emotionally torturing these people who were integral to his downfall, to his betrayal. Specifically in chapter 62, which is titled Ghosts, we see these key players descend upon the Count's new house outside of Paris proper. There's a lot of mystery in this house, and we're learning why, much more here. But I made a list. If you've read this book, you might know what I'm talking about. But I made a list of all of the people who are arriving at his house and sort of what their role is, whether they're friend or foe or merely a pawn in his plan. So I'm really just trying to help myself keep things straight. And essentially, we learn who the Cavalcantis are. Well, we learn who Andrea Cavalcanti is. He's the guy who's been hired to play the role of the son. We don't quite know who Major Cavalcanti is. I have a theory, but I'm going to keep that to myself just in case I'm wrong. And then in chapter 63, called The Dinner, we see how the Count is manipulating this house to just make sure that he's got his story straight, essentially. This servant that works for him, Bertuccio, is integral to Dantes, aka the Count, bringing together certain bits of information that is going to bring down De Vieux specifically. And we find, so spoilers if you have not read this book, maybe fast forward a couple minutes, but I'll give you a second to do that. We essentially find out, first of all, that Viscount Andrea Cavalcanti is Benedetto, who was the illegitimate son of Monsieur de Villefort and Madame Danglars and the affair that they had together. And if you remember earlier in the book, we hear from Bertuccio, the Count's servant, how he witnessed these two people bury this child in the backyard of this house. And so the Count, in his machination attempts, takes everybody up to this bedroom that he has left purposely untouched. And this is clearly where the scene of their affair took place. And again, this is Monsieur de Villefort, who was the crown prosecutor, deputy crown prosecutor at the time of Dantes's wrongful imprisonment. So he's the legal entity that sent Dantes to Chateau d'If prison. Baroness Danglars is fainting all over the place because she's having like emotional apoplexy at these like memories that are coming up for her being buried in this room, and the Count is just emotionally putting his thumb on the wound. Then the Count, he isn't done. He takes them all out to the garden and he basically takes them to the scene where De Villefort and Baroness Danglars bury their baby. And we were led to believe that this baby was dead when they buried it. And this chapter makes it sound like this child was still alive when they attempted to bury this baby. Horrific. So now we are really rooting for the downfall of these particular characters in general. And I think that's smart on the part of Dumas the author, because the wives are going to go down too. Even though they didn't have a direct hand in what happened to Dantes, they, by proxy, have been complicit in the further perpetuation of his pain and trauma. So that is what we learned in like 4 chapters. So I'm really excited to keep kind of moving forward with the book. I'm hopefully going to be able to read another 6 to wrap up the 10 chapters. I'm kind of goaling myself to read each week. But it's Tuesday, so I will have plenty of time to do that throughout the rest of this week. But yeah, if you are currently reading this book or if you have read this book, oh my gosh, let's chat in the comments because yeah, this book I think is going to have a really a really intense emotional payoff by the end of the novel. And I've heard a lot of people say that it wraps up in a very satisfying way. Hello, everyone. I wanted to do a quick reading update because I feel like it has been a hot minute since I have sat down face to face to talk about something other than like the Count of Monte Cristo or, sharing a few book hauls. So I want to do a reading update of what I just finished and what I'm kind of going to be picking up over the next few weeks. I just finished this absolutely incredible novel called I Gave You Eyes and You Look Towards Darkness by Irene Sola. I cannot recommend this enough. This is a story, to simplify it, it's a ghost story told through multiple generations of women living in this sort of cursed, haunted farmhouse. And while the novel technically only spans the course of one day, and each chapter is broken up into a segment of that day, through blending of POVs, we see how each generation of women has been cursed as a result of their matriarch Joanna's deal with the devil, where she asked for a husband in exchange for her soul. And Joanna thought that she could renege on that deal, if you will. And unfortunately, the devil always comes for what is his. And so, as a result, every child in her family is born with something vital that's missing. So, for example, one child is born with a heart that's too small, one child is born without a liver and dies, one without a tongue. One of her grandchildren is born without a heart capable of loving a mother. So, like, something is missing in each of the generations of children. And as I continued to read this book, I found myself asking this devil figure that haunts the family. I don't really get the sense that this is 100% a literal character, but I rather found it the culmination and personification, rather, of this patriarchal control, violence, and subjugation that women have found themselves subject to. We really get to know the political history of Spain throughout this novel as well. And I loved the way in which Sola blends folklore and cultural stories with the very real political tension, specifically borne out in the Spanish Civil War and World War One and Two. The novel prompts you to go do research about Spanish history, which I always love when reading translated fiction, that I'm prompted to go research elements of this country or culture's history that I am just not familiar with. So we get a little bit of that in this. I highly recommend this if you like strange, nonlinear POVs changing often, and you kind of have to go with the flow, if you will, of how the author is choosing to tell this story. She blends a lot: animal bodies, human bodies, time, space, past and present. If you like weird as hell, haunted, ghost, brutal, yet beautiful stories, this is going to be one you're going to want to pick up. I am in the middle of two books right now. This one is The Calico Cat and the Chibineko Kitchen by Yuta Takahashi. I grabbed this at the library because it has the most cute cover. I could not say no to this. I didn't realize, however, that this is book two in a series, and based on the very brief research I did on the internet, you don't necessarily have to read the first one, but I liked that these books center around food and this very cozy cafe on the Japanese seaside. Nagi finds that she has the same terminal illness that claimed the life of her mother when she was 5 years old. And her doctor has told her she only has several more years to live. So basically, get your affairs in order, live the life you want to live because your time is running out. And so she goes to the seaside to find this restaurant that many years earlier her mother said, if you ever miss me so much and you need a piece of me, come to this restaurant and they will cook you a remembrance meal. So she goes to this cafe. She meets this guy there whose name is Kai, and he is a local artist. I don't think he owns the cafe or anything, but I'm really early days, so that might be information that's coming out later. But either way, they meet the chef Kotoko, and he has this miracle of a restaurant that somehow is magically able to produce meals that allow you to experience your dead loved one over again. It's just very cozy and cute. I'm enjoying it. Next, I am still making my way through the Emma M. Lyon series. I am about to be done with volume 5. I'm actually hoping to finish this today because I saw that I can't renew volume 6 anymore at the library, so someone else is wanting to read this book. I got to get a move on. I would love to be able to finish both of these by the end of the week, but that's not going to happen because I am doing a buddy read with some folks over on Book Talk. It's called Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. This is another Spanish translated fiction, kind of in the realm of I Gave You Eyes and You Look Towards Darkness. This is very popular in the like translated fiction, literary fiction side of the book spaces. I'm really excited to tuck in. I think it's going to be a quick read because it's quite short. And as you can see, the like actual words on the page are not very big. So, but however, if you read these kinds of books, you will know the size can be deceiving because typically when a book is like this small, the thematic elements require a lot more attention. So, Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin is what's up next for me for buddy reads. And then, last but not least, in terms of what's coming up next on my TBR, is going to be Elena Knows by Claudia Pinheiro. If you follow me, you will know that I am a massive fan of anything that Charco Press puts out. This has been recommended to me so many times after I posted my reviews of Restoration by Ave Barrera, which is another Charco Press publication. This one focuses on Buenos Aires. This woman's daughter's body is found hanging in the belfry of a church, and the law enforcement rules it a suicide, but Elena, her mom, is like, absolutely not. I know my daughter. She would not do that. Something happened. And this is another novel that unfolds over the course of a single day, but she takes it upon herself to subvert law enforcement and go figure out what the hell happened to her daughter. And I've heard incredible things about this. And so I'm very excited to read this. I might actually bump this to the top of my TBR after I finish my buddy read, but we will see. I am deep in like the translated fiction side of publications and books. I think that as a result of my read through the International Booker Prize this year, I was not familiar with that award prior to January. And again, just kind of seeing people's reviews of these books on Book Talk and Instagram and various spaces, I got interested and I'm really hooked. I am finding that translated fiction specifically, or like books that would be eligible for the International Booker Prize, are really, in my opinion, pushing the margins of like creative storytelling, thematic depth, just lifting the art of writing with what you can do with a story. And in just, there's something so satisfying about that, particularly in these like tumultuous socio-political times of like, this is both an escape from my immediate reality, but still allowing me to deeply engage with political understanding on a global scale or originating from another culture, understanding that like actually these borders that we have assumed are between various people groups, we all suffer. We all suffer. And having that understanding of your neighbors culturally, politically, nationally, is a way forward into just a more empathetic and understanding world. And I've been really leaning into that with the books that I'm reading. So that was my tangent for this video. I hope you are blasting through your TBRs in whatever meaningful way that looks like for you. I would always love to know what you're reading. I'm going to end this one here. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm so glad you're here, and I will see you in the next one.